Hey everybody, the other day a friend of mine shared a post on Facebook about kind of some of the downfalls that she's had with living off grid, and I completely understood where she was coming from, especially coming from the fact that her and her family were not expecting to live off grid for an extended period of time. From what I understand, it was only supposed to be a couple weeks, and then like their electric and everything was going to get put in on the property, and they were going to be moving into their house quickly after that. So there's a lot of things that have happened to them because they were not expecting to live off-grid for an extended period of time. And I definitely understand that that is a very difficult situation to be in. Very hard if you have not, especially like mentally prepared for being off-grid for a long period of time, because it does require some mental preparedness in the sense of understanding what you're going to be coming up against and what may be happening. So my heart definitely goes out to my friend, but that kind of inspired me to share some of the things that we have learned by living off-grid for a few months now, and especially being on the property we're on now, where we do not have running water or electric on the property yet, hooked up to our camper. So I will be going over all of that in future episodes because this will be a series. But the first thing I wanted to kind of go over is, what can you live without? This is more the mental preparedness time period. When you are thinking about living off-grid, you have to understand that it's not going to be the same as living in a house. It's not going to be the same as living in the city or anything like that. You're going to be in a completely different situation. You're not going to be able necessarily to have all the creature comforts that you normally have by living in a house hooked up to electric and everything else. So it's something you have to think about, is what can we live without? So with our family going into this, we knew that we were going to be running off a generator and battery power. That was going to be our main forms of power, at least in the short term. So we knew that we did not want to have to spend a ton of money in gas, and we did not want to have to constantly be running the generator to top off the batteries and everything else. So we took a really hard look at electronics, at things that use electricity in our camper, and basically said, okay, what can we live without? So in our camper, we do not have a TV at all. No TV, no DVD player hooked up to the TV or anything like that. What we do have is a portable DVD player that we bought at Walmart, and we have all our kids' DVDs packed up and everything else, and it can hook up to 12 volts, so it can hook up into the 12 volt outlet in our camper, or it can hook up in our car, and it also does have a plug-in and a battery pack. So it's a way that kids can still kind of watch TV in the times we need them to be still. So I can, clean the camper and have them be still instead of running around the camper making more of a mess while I clean. But it doesn't use a lot of battery power or electricity with our camper. So that immediately we took out the TV. So we're not using any electricity with the TV. We also are not using a microwave. Now, to be completely honest, just for health reasons and EMF and everything else, we have not used a microwave in probably about 10 years. So that wasn't something that was like a hard thing for us to do. We literally just unplugged our microwave, and right now the microwave stores one of my Dutch ovens and the lighter for our propane stove. So it's really not something that was a hard thing for us, but that's something you do have to think about. Microwaves do use a lot of electricity, so you are probably, if you are on a generator or battery pack, that's going to be using up a lot of electricity if you're using a microwave constantly. So that's something you have to think about, that maybe you're not going to be able to have in your camper if you're living off-grid. Also, charging electronics. Now, I will say in our family, we do not have any tablets for our kids. They do not use tablets. They are not allowed to use our phones. They do have, I do occasionally let them use my laptop to play on like PBS and things like that, the PBS Kids games. But we don't have a lot of electronics that we're constantly having to charge. Again, that's something that we go to our car for, is we charge our phones in our car. I do charge my laptop in my car as well too. We do have an inverter to do that with it. But that's basically, if we're charging anything, we're a lot of times using the vehicle so that we're not using the electricity in the camper. Also thinking about too, with your AC, use it less. Now, I will say, when we were in Florida, just before we moved up here, it was super hot, like super hot, 90 some odd degrees before even noon. And the AC was on a lot more frequently. and we were going through the generator, going through gas in the generator a lot. And so that was pretty difficult in the way that it would get so hot so quickly. Now, in our camper, there's only a few windows that you can actually open. The rest are emergency exits. If we did have the ability to open more of our windows to where bugs wouldn't come in, we probably would have been able to last a little bit longer throughout the day, but usually by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was turning the AC on in the camper. But even at that point, we were sweating a lot. And that's something you have to understand, that you're not necessarily, again, going to have those comforts of what you would have in a house if you're living off grid. You may sweat a little bit more, even, in the early part of the day or even going to bed. You may not be quite as comfortable as you normally would be in a house, but that's something to think about, is can we live without constant AC? I will say, coming up here to Oklahoma, though, it has been much easier, because I think the hottest it's ever gone is 80 degrees, but there's always been a really nice breeze. So it's been beautiful, and we haven't had to use the AC at all. And also, too, living, one of the things to think about is, can you live in smaller spaces? This is something you really have to think about as a family. Is this something that you all as a family can handle without necessarily being at each other's throats all the time? Now, I'm not gonna lie, it is hard living in like 200 some odd square feet with 3 children and my husband and myself and our cats and then our dogs. Dogs are not allowed to come in, the cats come in occasionally. But we knew going into this that we were going to be in a much smaller space. We knew that we were going to be more cramped. The kids knew that the vast majority of their toys were going to go in storage, and there was only going to be a few select toys that they were going to be able to have even in the camper, because we couldn't store everything. And it's something you do have to work on. It's not something that comes super easily. It is something that, living in 200 square feet with 5 people, you have to be mindful of. I will say I send my kids outside regularly, usually by 10 a.m., if not earlier. I've sent them outside because I need to be able to clean or something else. And also, too, with our homeschool schedule, they do homeschool after lunch. So morning time is to play, to enjoy, to get their energy out and everything else. But that's something you have to think about, too, as a family, is, and mentally prepare yourself for, is living in a smaller space, not having that ability to get away from each other as much as you formerly could if you needed your space. And then also, as a husband and wife, understanding when when your spouse is getting to that point of, oh my gosh, I need some time away from the kiddos or something like that, and really being able to step up without necessarily your spouse always having to ask you to do that. There's been times where my husband, God bless him, but there's been times where, he's got 3 daughters and a wife, so he's around women all the time. So the other day he went to one of our ponds and he fished for half an hour by himself. And that was totally fine. I didn't care. Like, I had the kids, he went fishing, he needed his time alone. And then after about half an hour, we came up and we all fished together as a family, and we were good. There's been times he's taking care of the kids, I've gone for a walk around the property, it's fine. But that's something you have to mentally prepare yourself for when you know you're going into a smaller space and going into an off-grid situation, is being mindful of still getting that time to relax and decompress, but knowing that it's not necessarily going to be as readily available as it would be as if you were living in a larger home. So that's just some things to think about when you're living in an off-grid situation. Can you live without no TV, microwave? How are you going to charge your electronics? Are you going to use less electronics? Can you sweat a little bit? And knowing that your typical comforts and having your space isn't going to be as readily available. In future videos, I'll be going over our water situation. I'll be going more into electricity and things like that. But this was just kind of talking about being able to mentally prepare yourself for going off grid. So I hope you learned something. If you do have any questions or anything like that, you can drop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Right now, I'll see y'all later. Bye.